Did you want to talk about anything else specific today?
Yeah, okay. Actually, these days I don't really prepare for every lesson, but
Mm-hmm.
okay. So when I was taking a shower earlier, I thought that it'd be fun to talk about why Japanese people can't speak English. So is it okay to talk about this topic? I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna wing it.
Yeah, let's do
Usually
it.
I prepare for every lesson, so sometimes I read sentences, but this time I'm just going to talk about my opinion
Okay.
straight away.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so let me go first. Well, Japan is an island country, and Japanese is the only language spoken here, and people don't have to study English. So, for example, as long as you can understand Japanese, you can enter school and you can get various kinds of jobs here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think learning English is not mandatory. Well, I think this is one of the reasons, and I think you can go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think like what you said, it's not mandatory, and Japan has usually, I mean, Japan is kind of strict, I think, compared to most other countries in the sense that they don't let foreigners in very easily
Uh-huh.
to like live, you know? So yeah, I think because of that reason, for a lot of Japanese people, it's like if they don't have any plans of going abroad or living abroad, then they don't have any necessity to speak English,
Uh,
right? So,
yeah, I agree. That's
yeah,
true.
yeah. I also think that it's a cultural thing, just where I think Japanese people tend to be a little bit more introverted and
Mhm.
a little bit more, yeah, I mean, I guess shy, just for a lack of a better word, but I think they tend to be a little bit more introverted and shy.
Yeah.
And because of that, they don't, even the people who are studying English, maybe they don't try to speak it very often. They don't
Hmm.
like try to speak it very often because they're a little bit shy and introverted. Whereas I've noticed like a lot of Chinese people, they generally, these are all just generalities, but
Hmm.
generalizations, I should say. But I think Chinese people generally are more outgoing and
Hmm.
less self-conscious about what other people think of them. So they're much more likely to just speak whatever English they can speak
Hmm.
without being too worried about, oh, are they going to judge me or is my English correct or whatever, they just go for it. And I think because of that, though, they end up getting more practice with English
Mhm.
and so that's why I think that like Japan compared to China, for example, it seems like maybe they're not as good at English, but
Yeah, I think so too. Actually, I've heard of that. Well, I feel like Japanese people are too shy, and I feel like we are too afraid of making mistakes. So, for example, like let's say there's a foreigner and there's a Japanese, and what did I try to say? What I want to say is that we're afraid of making mistakes, and when there's a foreigner around them, they can't speak English. And I feel like, especially when Japanese people are around other Japanese, I feel like many people don't try to speak English because they don't want other people to hear how they speak.
right. Yeah. I think you're right. So, yeah, and I think that's a huge factor. I think that
Mhm.
makes a huge difference. Yeah. It's also, I
Yeah,
mean,
you're
it's
right.
also, it doesn't help that English is just very different from Japanese.
Ah, mhm.
Like most people here in the US like to learn Spanish. I mean, that's because we have a lot of Spanish speaking immigrants or descendants of immigrants here because we're right
Mhm.
next to Mexico. But also, like, Spanish and English are very similar, at least compared to, English and Japanese. We at least are using the same alphabet, and the grammatical order is mostly the same, right? You would say like, gosh, my Japanese and my Spanish always get mixed up. But you would say like, this is my friend, and then in Spanish you would say es mi amigo. Like S
Mhm.
is like this is my friend. It's the same order, but in Japanese you'd say boku no tomodachi desu. My
Yes.
right, my
Mhm.
friend it is. So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
heard that in English, like important information comes first, but in Japanese, important information comes at the end of the sentence. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't heard it explained that way before. That's interesting.
I think I've heard of this. For example, like in English, verb is pretty important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it comes usually right after the subject. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if this happens all the time, but usually verb comes after like the subject, right? But in Japanese, verb comes at the end of the sentence. なんなんしました、なんなんします something like that.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
So I think, yeah, like you said, the structure of sentences are completely different.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think, like that difference and then just the huge difference between hiragana and katakana and kanji versus the English alphabet. And then also the fact that English is really hard, I would imagine, because we don't follow rules very well. Like spelling, for example. Like if you have like through and rough, like I'm just typing those out.
Ah,
Right? But like the word through is pronounced like that. So then you'd look at the word rough, but it looks like the word through just without the th. So you would think it's pronounced rue, but it's not.
yeah.
So like I think that's another thing too, where there's not very many consistent rules with like spelling and pronunciation. So I would imagine that makes it very difficult. Same thing with like verb conjugation, right? Like I ate versus I fell versus I don't know what's like other verbs end with ed, but like eat becomes ate, fall becomes fell, but defeat becomes defeated, right? Yeah, so I think those are other reasons like where it's so different, but it's also just so hard because the rules aren't followed very consistently.
Yeah, and like how to conjugate verbs is different.
Right.
I know
exactly.
what you mean. Yeah, eat, ate, feel, fell, speak, spoke,
Right.
play, played.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that's another big barrier for Japanese people to learn English, I would imagine.
In my opinion, I don't think that how to conjugate verbs is not really hard, but pronunciation is definitely very difficult for me. I feel like people who study Japanese are very good at listening to Japanese, but I don't know why. In my opinion, I think that they can, if they see like characters, Japanese words, hiragana, they know how to read it. But in English, even if we see words, sometimes we don't know how to pronounce the word, right?
Oh, yeah. True. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I guess for us though, the flip side to that though is that if it's not hiragana or katakana and if it's just a new word in kanji that we don't know, then we we have no idea how to pronounce it or read it, and it's also a lot harder to look it up. I guess nowadays though they have apps where you can like draw the kanji, so you can kind of copy it. But other than that, it's difficult to look it up when you don't even know how to read it or type it, or write it. But
I've heard of that because I have many opportunities to talk with foreigners who study Japanese and they look up some kanji they encounter for the first time. So how about you? How do you look them up?
yeah, I just have a little app on my phone, and fortunately, it has a feature where I can like draw the kanji, and then it will like figure it out based on that, and it'll be like, oh, is this the one you're looking for? Yeah.
It's a pain. You have to write multiple times to make the kanji.
Right. Yeah.
It's a pain.
I mean, if I know how to read it or if I can guess how to read it, then I can just type it in. But
Oh, okay.
if I have no idea how to read it, then I have to just draw the kanji. Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah.
How about pronunciation? I feel like even they are beginners, I feel like foreigners who study Japanese are very good at listening to Japanese, but I don't know why. Is it easier for foreigners to catch Japanese pronunciation, Japanese words?
I don't think so. I think listening might be the hardest part
Eh?
for me personally. I know a lot of people would say otherwise. For like other people, they think speaking is harder than listening.
I think so.
But for me personally, I don't know. I feel like listening is harder. When I'm speaking, I feel like I'll figure out, what I need to say eventually. It might take me some time and it might not be perfect, but I feel like I can do it. Whereas with listening, I have no control over it because it's the other person speaking.
Yeah.
And Japanese, I don't know if this is true, but my sister was saying that I think she saw a thing that Japanese is like the fastest language in the world, just in terms of like syllables, right? Like it was just like
Oh,
Takada no baba, like it's like it's very rapid fire Japanese. So I don't know. Yeah. So for us, that's hard to
へえ。
hard
I,
hard to understand.
I had never thought that Japanese sounds fast because
Right.
for me, Japanese sounds very slow and English sounds much faster. So
Right.
they're the opposite.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's naturally, right? Like to me, naturally, Japanese is going to sound faster because it's harder to. But I think if we try to be a little bit objective, I think it makes sense because in English, we always have like every word has a syllable that's more stressed, like more pronounced, like
Mhm.
baseball. We emphasize the baseball. Whereas Japanese, you're always trying to give every syllable equal
Ah, yeah.
value, right? Like takara no
Mhm.
baba. There's not as much emphasis there.
Mhm.
Some of them I'm sure do, but generally speaking, it's more even. So I think because of
Ah,
that, you can say words faster without having to slow down to emphasize any of the syllables.
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like English sounds, I mean, Japanese sounds more monotonous compared to English.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, it looks like we're about out of time for today. But
Yeah.
thank you. This was a fun discussion.
Thank you so much for rescheduling today's lesson and sparing your time for me today. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of course. Is 2 weeks good? 2 weeks from today? Oh wait,
Yeah.
or 1 week because your tutor.
Yeah. In 1 week. See you
One week.
later.
Okay.
現在、英語コーチングの生徒さんを募集しています。英語学習を頑張っているけど継続することが難しい。英語力が伸び悩んでいる。TOEIC のスコアが頭打ちしている。ぜひこのような方は無料カウンセリングへどうぞ。下の概要欄から申し込むことができます。ぜひ無料カウンセリングでお会いしましょう。